Yes, Naipaul has written his 22nd book. It is called Away in the World. He was a recent guest on this broadcast, and one of the finest writers in the world is in New York. It is our pleasure to have them come back. This is a unique opportunity for us to continue our conversation about writing, about this book, and I first want to welcome him back. Thank you for doing this. And I'd like to start with having you read from the beginning of the book and then pick up our conversation, which we first did yesterday.
This is from the first chapter, which is called Prelude and Inheritance. I left home more than 40 years ago. I was 18. When I went back after 6 years, and slowly, a 2-week journey by steamer, everything was strange and not strange. The suddenness of night, the very big leaves of some trees, the shrunken streets, the corrugated iron roofs. You could walk down a street and hear the American advertising jingles coming out of the rediffusion sets in all the little open houses. 6 years before, I had known the jingles the rediffusion sets played, but these jingles were all new to me and were like somebody else's folk song now. All the people on the street were darker than I remembered. Africans, Indians, whites, Portuguese, mixed Chinese. In their houses, though, people didn't look so dark. I suppose that was because on the streets I was more of a looker, half a tourist. And when I went to a house, it was to be with people I had known years before, so I saw them more easily. To go back home was to play with impressions in this way. The way I played with the first pair of glasses I had, looking at a world now sharp and small and not quite real, now standard size and real, but blurred. The way I played with my first pair of dark glasses, moving between dazzle and coolness. Or the way, on this first return, when I was introduced to air conditioning, I liked to move from the coolness of an air-conditioned room to the warmth outside and back again. I was in time over the years and over many returns to get used to what was new, but that shifting about of reality never really stopped. I could call it up whenever I wished. Up to about 20 years ago, whenever I went back, I could persuade myself from time to time that I was in a half-dream, knowing and not knowing. It was a pleasant feeling. It was a little like the sensations that came to me as a child when, once in the rainy season, I had fever.
When you went back through these pages, what was the inheritance you were looking for?
The inheritance I was looking for? Well, I wasn't looking for an inheritance. I think one writes very instinctively. One doesn't write programmatically because that writing falls dead. And even that beginning, which I've just read, which in a way contains the method of this book, yes, looking in different lights, in different ways, in different moods, different periods at one's background. Although it contains that writing was entirely instinctive and related to the subject I had in hand at that moment, that first part of that first chapter. So the program, the looking for the inheritance, is something that would emerge during the writing, and not looking for, discovering of.
What do you mean by instinctive?
I tell you, a writer he's going to do something. He'll do one thing, he'll do two things, he'll do three things. Probably there are 3 levels of consciousness. But in the writing, there are many more levels, if the writing is any good. And this is where the reader starts reading his own book. Because the better the writer, the more he's sunk into his material, the more there are things in it he's not aware of at the moment of writing. There are many things I became aware of in this book when people read it to the publishers here and in England. And one had to deal with copy editors with their queries. And then one had to read the proofs for both places, the second proofs as well. So every time I read the book, things came out that had been written into it. And it works like this. To write a work of the imagination, you split yourself into the various people you're writing about. And there is an intensity, therefore, which produces surprising results, not only in the imagery, but in the themes. I was aware, for example, as I was writing this, that there was an obsession with food, various kinds of food, and the food of the New World, particularly cocoa. I was aware an obsession with dress as style, dress as rags. Everybody has a particular kind of dress. I was aware with, I felt I was aware with death, you know, aware of death and corpses and burial. But there were many other things that came over when I began to read it in the various ways I told you. I saw that people had become parodies, that theme recurred. I saw that the land had been scraped clean in many places. The words occurred in various parts of the world. I saw things like that.
When you look, when you wrote this, it has been described as a novel.
Yes.
You consider it a novel?
I would say it's a work of the imagination. And since there is no category in the booksellers' shops saying a work of the imagination, the publishers have to find a way of presenting it.
But why do you call it a work of the imagination and not simply a novel? I question novels simply because other people have as well,
yes,
and because a lot of it is personal.
Yes.
A lot of it is almost a historical narrative.
Yes, yes. But what looks new and startling, as so often with forms that are original, really go back quite far. Every time you read the work of a writer, you tend to know about the writer. The writer establishes his personality. That's all that's been done with the writer introducing himself as a kind of chorus and making it clear to you who is the man and what background he comes from, who's looking at the world in this particular way.
You have become more personal in your writing as you have grown older.
I suppose always personal. All writing is personal. What I've done more, I've had to find a way of, because when I began to write, English-speaking writers were people who came from the United States or from England. And there were hardly people of Asian background from colonies in the New World. So the third-person narrative, that detached, divine, godlike tone, wouldn't work, really. I felt the need always to identify who the writer was. And I think Maugham has done this in his work. I think Proust has done this. I think we know all writers, really, about their past. So what appears to be personal and stressing an autobiographical element is only, as it were, doing something that has been done by other writers and is part of their work.
And it is the way you become authentic, I guess.
Authentic. Explain that.
Well, I mean, it is since it is the person is what is ultimately unique about you.
Yes, but I think all writers have their own voice. And all writers have their own sensibility. And this is why we go to a particular writer, not for a staggering plot, perhaps, but for that sensibility, that
which
way,
speaks to us.
That way of looking.
Yeah. It is said that the way of looking that you have, by some, is
Yes.
of an outsider.
Yes.
Which may reflect growing up in Trinidad.
Yes.
Poor.
Yes.
Lost your father when you were young. Mother had a tremendous influence. Oxford at 18, different on scholarship.
Yeah.
You think that's true? That the sensibility is that of an outsider and someone who is looking for their place to belong, their place to be someone?
Well, I would say outsider, because although that is such a romantic word, isn't
All right.
it? Very romantic.
I'm a
Very
romantic.
romantic
Yes, I
word.
know, but I'm a
But
romantic.
the second part about looking for a place to belong, not strictly true. And the reason is the world is full of people like me. The whole new world is peopled by people in my situation.
Now, how would you describe people in your situation?
People who contain many, many strands in their cultural makeup. people who don't have a single identity, who don't have one tribal identity, people who can carry 20, 30, 40 ideas of who they are in their heads. Most people have always been able to do that because cultures have always been mixed. I can think of very few cultures that have remained entirely isolated. Massive migrations in Europe, great movements in Asia, Africa, in the Pacific. New Zealand settled in about 1,000 years ago.
Is a sense of, if I ask about the core philosophy that's part of the sensibility, is it, in your own view of the world, an essential, or at least your personal perspective, an essential need for order, for place, for things to have some sense of history, if you might? A respect for history and a respect for order and a respect for the remembrance of both.
A respect for
history.
For history.
You know.
You think people should have, you say...
Yeah, well, of course, I'm asking if you do.
If I have respect. Yes, I adore the idea of history. I think we must lose our egocentric ideas that the world has begun only with us and is going to end with us. There are many people before us, and especially in this part of the world, and my part of the world, from which I came, there were the Aborigines, first of all. I'm very concerned about that, too. So one is aware of a great shuffling of people all the time, and to ignore that shuffling, to concentrate on one little identity, which might be your ancestral identity, should we say Indian, or if you're a European, to say I'm a European, I think that is too petty, and that is not strictly true.
What is the legacy, in your judgment, of colonialism?
And very good legacy, very, very good. I think a country like India has benefited enormously, and it would be churlish and foolish and inaccurate for any Indian to deny it. Through the British conquest, India developed new learning. It was also granted a great period of peace, which it hadn't had for centuries before, with the Muslim conquest and invasions of India. India was trampled over ceaselessly. And with the British conquest, for the first time, you have ideas of human rights coming in, ideas of institutions, courts, law. Before that, everything belonged to the ruler. That was the limit of Indian government. There's a fantasy about village republics. Don't believe it for a second. And people were that's how, until quite recently, Indians took great care not to appear richer, not to appear rich, not to attract the malevolence of the ruler. Because the ruler owned everything, and everything was in his power to give. You will hear about the Mughal rulers that there was a bell hanging outside the Red Fort in Delhi, and anyone who wanted justice could go and ring the bell, and that this was an idea. Well, isn't that a childish idea to promote, that was justice?
How do you explain, I mean, I think of...
So the new learning in India gives India the institutions, which is now, India has raced ahead in the 50 years of independence. This has not come...
Because it had the institutions that the British brought with them.
Because it developed those institutions, yes. Before that, there were none.
Do you think that would be the majority, that would be the conventional wisdom in India by the people of India today?
I think it will develop. I think that this year, I hope I'm getting this right, is the 200th anniversary of the death of Sir William Jones. Sir William Jones went out as a judge for the East India Company in Bengal, Calcutta, and he founded a thing called the Royal Asiatic Society. His work in Indian civilization, his rediscovery of Indian texts, fabulous work for which we must all be grateful. These things were being lost the way the Roman texts were lost. And he had to discover a lot of them from old pundits, old religious men, who thought it was wrong to, many of them thought it was wrong to treat the language of the gods, Sanskrit, to make that too public. So there was a strong dark side and obscurantist side to the pundits. They were destroying their culture.
If you hadn't gone to school in Oxford when you were 18 and hadn't chosen to live there after Oxford, with some visits going back to Trinidad, Do you think it would have been the place that you would have chose to live because of its institutions, because of its history, because somehow it as a place resonated with you?
Well, it is what I've done, and it's very hard to think of another place to go to. But to write a book is a very physical object. It has to be produced. It has to be sold. That means factories. That means a buying public. It's not only an emanation of spirit. And so if you wanted to be a writer, you have to be in a place where there was that industry to support the trade.
And that's where you ought to be.
Yes, I couldn't be anywhere else.
Let me ask one political question in the time I have remaining. When you look at Rwanda, when you look at Bosnia,
yes,
what does it say to you? I mean, why this kind of extraordinary violence today? Where does that...
I'll tell you. Bosnia, certainly I'll tell you. Because they were fed for a long time on a tremendous, tremendous lie. And that's the communist lie. And the theme is dealt with in one of the characters in this book. A black man who thought he would suppress all his pain in this discovery that he's not really a black man, he's really communist.
Right.
And when that is rubbed away, rubbed away, the black man remains. And when he goes to Africa and Africa appears to be on the move, he becomes he's a racist. Now, so what has happened is that these people have had this false thing taken away, and they've just discovered the only truth which they possess, their tribal truth. This is happening. Bosnia, that's what it is. And it's happening.
Tribal truth means that
in
the end they're finding out who they really are, and who they really are puts them in conflict with their neighbor?
Yes, and because in that limited, crippling, uneducated, lying society, they have not been fed anything that enables them to understand more about their neighbors. And so that is the only loyalty available to them now. The tribal loyalty is the first thing. It's the only thing that protects them. Take that away, they feel they'll vanish, they'll disappear. So they're frantic in a way that you can't understand.
It almost defines them.
Yes, yes, and they're frantic. If you take away that tribal identity, they feel they'll be destroyed. They don't have laws to appeal to. There isn't a kind of institutions or voting which will protect them. They haven't grown up with that idea. And in a more primitive way, that is true of Rwanda. I went to Rwanda in 1966, you know. Yeah. I spent a short time there. And even there had just been massacres, and the same stories that are occurring about the bodies floating down the river, and the river running red.
Right, yeah.
Yes, those were still those stories were then, even then. And there was a very frightening moment during that drive. The road was there, empty, the motor road, and there was the forest. And suddenly, really, one was aware that we weren't alone. The forest was full of people on the move, full of moving people. Anything could have happened. I feel something like that. I can visualize what is happening in Rwanda. But you see, this is where I think African intellectuals, sub-Saharan African intellectuals, owe it to their country and their continent to do some more thinking about why they're in that mess. It isn't enough to blame the Belgians. I see so many people are doing it. The Belgians didn't send the Tutsis there. Belgians, hardly there, 50 years. So there is work to be done.
If you talk to people around the world, and there seems to be one of the currents happening today is the spread of fundamentalism.
Yes.
In an interview you did with the editor of the India Times,
yes,
you said that's a passing phase.
Yes.
Why do you think that? Because it seems to be on the march.
Yes, it's a form of, it's like that. It's a little bit like the communist thing in which people are suppressing their anxieties in a kind of a bogus truth. Yeah. And it's so without intellectual substance.
In a sense, you give yourself over to...
Yes, and it's a way of dealing with the difficult world.
It's almost like passing responsibility.
Exactly, exactly. You are not responsible. It's somehow, yes, you've shifted onto the faith who will look after the world for you if you honor it enough and if you're fierce enough in its defense. But at the same time, these people who are fundamentalists get on the Boeings and they want green cards.
Yes.
They want to come and live here with you and open restaurants.
And they know the fundamentalism
deep down in their hearts, they know, and this is part of the anguish of a lot of the Islamic world. And the chaps at the universities here who are promoting fundamentalism are not really serving any good cause.
Yeah. One last question. A lot of this book is about people who live a lie. Yes,
Yes, yes, yes.
Any part of, yet at the same time, you have defined yourself and the writer as the seeker of truth.
Yes, yes, yes.
Any part of your life that you know, in a sense, has been living a lie?
The reason why I'm so affected by the lie, I suppose, because I was aware that when things were really bad with me and I was young, I began to fall into lies. And there were on occasions, they're not important lies, but there were lies. And they were going to take one to madness, the way lies do. Very few of us can be as successful, if he was successful, as Raleigh, who's in this book, who lied about everything, but managed to write his own script. There is a town called Raleigh, North Carolina.
Yes, it is, the capital, thank you very much.
And there's a hotel there, and there's a picture of this glorious
Sir Walter
man.
Raleigh it is.
Yes, glorious man in Elizabethan costume,
Yes.
this absolute scoundrel.
On that note, I thank you. Away in the World, the 22nd book by V.S. Naipaul. I thank you for coming again.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. Stay with us.